All right, let's get started. Welcome to today's session on innovative ways to make your procurement process more efficient and effective. And we'll be using event management to show you how we can do that in that particular space. But first, a little bit about myself. My name is Kevin Wilson. I'm the Extended Supply Chain Solution Practice Lead for Q Data USA. Our primary focus is in the supply chain space and helping folks realize business value through the implementations of standard SAP solutions out there. Our focus is on SAP. We do believe they have a good tool in most of the areas, and sometimes we need to enhance it a little bit, but we do believe in the philosophy of moving forward with the standard solution out there. And so what I'm showing you today is leveraging a lot of standard functionality, but then taking that a little step further and showing you how you can get some real business value out of using this tool in your procure-to-pay process. Throughout this webinar, if you have any questions, please type them in the little question bar. If you like what you're hearing today, feel free to follow us on Twitter at Q Data USA or the hashtag Q Data_EM. We'll give you the specific stuff that we're tweeting around EM, and we have several of our folks doing that all the time, so there's some good stuff. Also on Facebook, we have a company page out there and a specific page on event management where we put all the latest tips and tricks and OSS notes, releases that are out there. Like, for example, Service Pack 5 was released 2 days ago. It's mentioned there on the website. We have a WordPress blog as well as a LinkedIn page. There's also a LinkedIn group on the SAP Event Management if you need to ask anything out there. And our WordPress blog also has some detailed information on not just event management, but also transportation management, serialized track and trace. And there's several of the other areas that we focus on heavily in the supply chain space. Batch traceability is another big one. So this month is our theme is SAP Event Management, and this is the second of the four. So last week we covered basically what are the possibilities that SAP Event Management provides to a solution architect. So it's a tool that's out there, and we introduced that tool to the architects last week. So if you missed that one, you can download that from the website. It's also available on YouTube, that particular one. Today, as I said, we're going to cover the procurement process, and this one will also be out there on YouTube this afternoon. Also on the website, I'll show you where to find it now. But in the coming weeks, we'll be going through a few more things. So next week, we'll focus heavily on the order-to-cash process and what we've done in the space over there. That's a very popular scenario that's been implemented out there to give you visibility into your order-to-cash process. So if that's something that's a painful area for you guys, then certainly come in and listen to that one as well. And then the last week, we're going to focus on transportation management. Again, supply chain is our focus. Transportation management is a big part of that. So let's show you how we can affect some change in that space. For this particular one, if you like what you see and you want to download it or listen to it again, go to our website, qdatausa.com, click on the resource button at the top right, and then previously recorded webinars. Then if you need to register for the ones coming up, it's the button right there on the left-hand side. So we have a short agenda today, but we've got quite a lot of content to cover in that second piece. But first, we're going to spend about 4 or 5 slides just on telling you what event management is if it's the first time you've seen it. And then we're going to go through 3 scenarios where we've helped in the procurement space. So these are actual use case, production use case scenarios that we've used these to affect some change in organizations, and then we'll just follow with a wrap-up. So first things first, what's event management? Well, event management was born out of supply chain event management dating back to 2000, like 1999, 2000, in that area, where they coined the phrase supply chain event management. It supports control processes for managing events within and between companies in the supply chain. It consists of a set of integrated software functionality that supports the 5 business processes: monitor, notify, simulate, control, and measure. So SAP was a big part of that organization, or that effort to come up with, where are our issues in the supply chain, and SAP's solution, or implementation of supply chain event management is a module that they released back in 2004, and that is called SAP Event Management. And it's basically a standard tool that folds those 5 processes that we just spoke about. It provides track and trace functionality. So track, for example, is where is my product right now. Trace is the functionality that shows you where has my product been, in whose hands has it been, when was it there, when was it manufactured, and so forth. And the monitoring of the status of those processes. So as the business process gets kicked off and events occur, or activities occur against that particular business process, for that particular item that's flowing through that business process, we assign a status to it, and we provide the visibility to that business process to the folks. Measure compliance with the process plan. So as your business process evolves, the plan can change, right? But there should always be a plan to how to effectively executing on that business process. So in the procure to pay space, when you create your purchase order, you will have a purchase order schedule that says, this is when we want you to deliver this particular product to me, and this is how much of a product that it should be, and this is the type of product, and this is the price of the product. All of that sort of forms part of the plan. When there's event management, the tool to measure your compliance with this plan. So we create the purchase order, and then they come back and they say, we can't deliver it on this date, but on this date, right? So we change the plan, and then when it actually gets executed, then we have a look and see, all right, you said you were going to deliver it on Monday, but it's Tuesday, and that's when you delivered it. So that's not compliant, again. So based on the compliance towards the plan, we can raise exceptions for that one. So then we can notify someone to take corrective action, so that will basically the adjust portion. So we notify someone that they can adjust the plan or adjust the expectation to the customer to say it's going to now be late. And the last part is giving visibility to the business process, to the extended folks, when I say extended folks, people that are not hands-on involved in that business process. So in the purchase order space, for example, the buyer, you may have created that PO or is managing that PO, is managing those materials. He's intimately involved and has these tools. But what about the buying manager? What about the sales rep who's waiting for this PO to be drop shipped to their customer? Those are people that are have an extended need to understand what's going on in this procurement process, and event management is a tool to provide them that easy visibility into that particular process. All right, so the business drivers for event management, the first one being risk mitigation. Certain industries have regulations, are regulated in that particular for those particular business processes. For example, in the pharmaceutical industry, cold chain type processes where, a particular drug product as it moves through the supply chain can't be outside of a 2 to 8 degree Celsius range for longer than 60 hours. We need some way to measure that, and then if the government asks for the information, we need to be able to provide the information to tell them exactly how long it's been outside of the cold storage. So we need that type of information. We also need for the fact of counterfeit products being infiltrating our supply chain, we need to be able to authenticate that the product that we purchased from this particular supplier and is moving on to the next distributor, for example, is a valid transaction within the business process. With real-time exception notification, we can proactively address any of these issues and reduce our risk. All right. So if we The first time we uncover the fact that there's a counterfeit coming into our supply chain, we can immediately stop it there. The last thing we want is for that particular counterfeit drug product to flow through the supply chain and out our door, and then ultimately end up, being fatal towards someone, and we're going to be liable for that too. Lack of process visibility. This is a big one out there. Like I said, SAP is really geared towards transactions itself, and the folks that are executing those transactions, they have exception monitors around those particular transactions, and they have access. What we want to do is bring that visibility up and give that visibility, across a few more of our departments, if you will. So sales, finance, procurement all need to have visibility into, the procurement process to make sure that everybody understands what's going on and everybody's part of the same process at the end of the day, from the sales order that's generating my purchase order that's to the accounts payable person that needs to pay this at the end of the day. When you extend that a little bit further into the customer side of things, even the supplier side of things, you give that visibility to the customer, you improve that customer satisfaction, and you reduce the costs because we minimize our uncertainties in the process. Remember that I said we're going to capture the plan, and as and when we see that the actual execution against that plan differs in any way, then we can immediately react to maybe get the plan back on track, right? So we minimize the uncertainties there because we know exactly what's going on at every point of our process, and we can take corrective action immediately. Reducing the time to action, obviously everything. If we're reacting to an actual event that's occurring as and when it occurs, we can reduce the time to action because we're uncovering the exception there and then as it occurs, and we're going to trigger off a corrective action task for someone to do. So we're reducing their time to action. I spoke a little bit about the transparency across a dispersed supply chain. So if you have several supply chain folks out there, you can give them access into that into your business process via the event management tool. Our desire for continuous process improvement. So when we talk business process out here and we're trying to uncover exceptions, obviously we want to do better and better and better. So one way of actually doing it, let's put the data that's flown through our business process, 1,000 times over. Let's put that into an analytical tool. Let's see and measure against our key performance indicators, and we can start to set the levels of how we'd like to perform, and then we can measure against those, and we can start to drive more and more business value and better performance out of our business process because we have an understanding of what's going on in that business process. We've got many examples of improving the business process by merely providing that visibility to the customer. Okay. Just a little bit more on event management so that we can introduce some of the concepts to you, right now. Each business process that we want to track within an event management space is represented by an event handler. So all the scenarios you look at, we go through in a short while. We'll focus on the purchase order at a line item level, and that would relate to an event handler. And then some of the other ones would be maybe a carrier tracking business process. Maybe an invoice would be another event handler out there. A goods receipt, purchase order acknowledgement would be events against a purchase order line item. For each event handler, we have attributes, and attributes just a value describing that particular event handler. So, for example, a purchase order line would have a material number, it would have a quantity, it would have the supplier supplying this, maybe the expected delivery date, all quantities, price, all parameters that are associated with that particular event handler. A tracking ID is a unique value. Actually, it's not a unique value. It's a value that's assigned to the event handler against which we post an event to, and we use that one to post the event. An example in the purchase order space would be the PO number and the PO number plus the line item number. If we want to create an event against a PO, for example, we want to cancel the PO, we would create one event with the PO number as the tracking number, and all 6 event handlers, because there were 6 lines on that particular PO, would then get the canceled event, and we would change the status to canceled and notify people if need be. If we just reject one line item, then we would pass in the tracking ID of the PO number plus the line item number, and only that line item will get that event. Just some sort of detail. Against the event handler, that's where we store our milestones or the plan. Okay. Measurements are also part of the plan. Measurements can be weight, it can be temperature, for example. So we would potentially say when you ship the product, you know, the weight needs to be this, because our master data says it's 10 pounds. When you ship the product, I want to see 10 pounds in there, but if they ship the product and it says 8 pounds, we could react to the fact that that's also not part of the plan. Right? So then we can either fix up our master data or go back and say, did you ship all of our products, because it seems to be a bit light. Okay. Our actual events posting can also contain attachments. So we can contain, if we're doing a proof of delivery, for example, at the customer, and we get their signature, we could attach that signature to the event and post it into event management. Any change to the plan as and when the process occurs, because some events we don't really know what the date and time should be when we're supposed to execute that until later on in the process. So in the procure to pay process, for example, when should we pay this, you know, for this particular PO? Well, we don't know until we get the invoice, right? So only when we get the invoice in from the supplier, we can start the terms, and we can say, all right, we'll pay you 25 days from receipt of invoice, you know, to ensure we get our discount of net 30. Then you would go ahead and put the date and time in the system as the plan, but only when we receive the invoice. We talk a little bit about pre-configured configuration coming from event management. So with event management, we get what we call visibility processes, which are certain sets of configuration and development and other content from SAP that cover certain business processes. So certain event handlers, for example. So we do have a lot of data on the procurement function, process that comes standard. So we got the EM configuration, and we've got the ECC extraction configuration. We've got some BI content, and in some certain scenarios we also have PI content for integration piece. And all of the visibility processes come with scenario documentation, which tells you exactly what they've done in order to implement or in order to execute this. Here's my test plan, so run this transaction, and you'll get your visibility in there. The visibility processes, just a quick overview of some of them. The procurement one is the one that we're going to deal with right now. That comes out of ECC. The fulfillment process, we've got so deliveries, purchase orders, production orders, transportation. In the auto ID space, if you're doing, you know, barcoding, stuff like that, we've got returnable transport items, product tracking and authentication. Also in the procurement space, if you're using SNC, we've got responsive replenishment, purchase order functionality too. They also delivered. When we say it's pre-configured and delivered, it doesn't mean that you can plug it in and voila, it all works nicely. There's a lot of hard-coded stuff in there. It really is meant for a template to jumpstart your implementation. So if you want to do procure-to-pay visibility, we would most certainly leverage that standard visibility process and then adapt it to make sure that it's using your material groups or your PO types, and the information that you're pulling out of the system is relevant to you and not what SAP thought was relevant. All right, so let's get into the stuff. As I said, we're going to go through 3. The first one over here, I'm going to go through the typical procure-to-pay scenario that's out there. We've enhanced this one, so this is a real-life scenario. It's done at a large movie studio. Procure to Pay is a very popular one, so we've done it several other times too. This one is a specific one that was done for the movie studio. So just an overview of the process. It's normal. If I'm taking this with a customer, we would generate the PO, send it out to our supplier. On the supplier side, they would cater for the sales or create the sales order, acknowledge the order back. That's number 2. On our side over there, we had to create a PO confirmation on our side. Then the particular supplier would ship the product. They would send us an ASN, hopefully EDI 856. We would generate an inbound delivery in our SAP system. And when the product actually arrives at our door, we would do a good receipt on that against that inbound delivery. Then the supplier would create the invoice. We would receive that invoice into SAP, and then we would make the payment. All right. So all the yellow pieces, 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, and 8. Those are transactions that are happening in our ECC system, and those are all transactions and events that we want to track within event management and provide that visibility. Okay, so you can see all of the arrows going into EM from there. So let's take the process and walk through it step by step. We create the PO. Everybody knows how to create the PO. As soon as we create the PO, this is the information I've now sent over to the event management. So on create, off it goes and creates a view in event management again for that event handler. So this is my PO number and the line number next to it. So remember I mentioned it's at the PO item level. The little yellow triangles at the top on the left-hand side explain to me that it's a milestone. I have a date and time in which I expect things to happen. If it doesn't happen by that date and time, then I'm going to go overdue, and I can react to the fact that they haven't happened on date and time. The payment one is a little gray one, which says I'm a milestone, but I don't have a date and time yet. So in this particular process, I'm expecting to receive an acknowledgement, I'm expecting to receive an advance ship notice, and I'm expecting to receive the goods, and I'm expecting to receive an invoice. Okay. The bottom screen over here, I've got my status as it is shown. So right now, I've broken it up into 3 different categories of the status because the PO, you want to look at a different view of the status. So from a procurement status perspective, I have sent the PO to my supplier. That's what I'm saying there. If he comes back and he cancels it or we cancel it, then we would update that status to cancel. We have an acknowledgement status. Right now we have no acknowledgement. All right, so we haven't received anything yet. And from an invoicing perspective, it's obviously not invoiced. What does it look like? And that previous one was the SAP view on it. This is the web UI, which is a configurable user interface. That is, so in other words, there's no development done, to actually, show this view over here. This is a configurable UI. This is what we give to the folks out there, okay, to access their status. So we can define like what are our selection criteria, procurement status. We're going to say, all right, let's show me all my POs that have been sent to my suppliers. It lists up our POs. Right there in the status, for example, it tells me no acknowledgement and it's not invoiced and so forth. So from a one-page perspective, I can get a quick overview of everything that's out there, not acknowledged. I could have also put in the selection criteria, also just show me the ones that haven't been acknowledged, so I can hone in on the ones that I need to look at. If I just expand the screen a little bit, we can see some of the details. So I've selected one of my event handlers, the second box down over there. I can get whatever detail I send through to the system. So I've got the purchase order number, I've got the status again. I could put in there the supplier number, I could put in the supplier address, and so forth. And then the bottom one over there is the same view, but of my event out there. So this is a web user interface to show that. And we'll show it as we go through the process, how that changes. All right, now we generate a PO acknowledgement. Bottom part of the screen over there, you can see we've acknowledged the order for a particular date. We jump onto the next screen. There there in event management, you can see the little yellow icon has turned green now. So we've actually received that one. It's my actual reported date and time. We capture that functionality or that information. On my event handler overview on the bottom left-hand side, I'm showing the receipt of that event. Okay, received acknowledgement. On the bottom right-hand side, I'm showing my status view of my event handler. And you can see my acknowledgement status has now got an extra item over there. And you read these acknowledgements, bottom up. So my first status for my acknowledgement status attribute was no acknowledgement sent yet, but now it's okay. Okay. Okay, just meaning that we received the acknowledgement and everything was exactly as I asked for. Right? But if they came back and they changed the date and time, it would have been a discrepancy. It would have said received with discrepancy, and we could potentially have kicked off corrective action for that. This one over here, we got back, it's fine. If we go back into our web UI and you say, show me all my POs that have been sent, now you see our one particular PO is now has an acknowledgement status of okay. The other two that were out there, are not okay. Okay. So they're still waiting. We look in the bottom side over there. It's the same view, which is the event coming in. So it's showing us the detail. Okay. The next step. Let's go ahead and generate an inbound delivery for that particular PO. We notice that now we have an event, a little green one showing up that it was reported 7 days later that we received an advanced ship notice, and it's on a good date and time. It hit the target. The bottom left-hand side shows the event being received, and then we see our status on the bottom right-hand side to say our procurement status has now moved into in-transit. So we went from, I've sent it to the PO to it's now on its way to me. Okay. So now we do our search and event management, and what we've done over here is just put in the PO number. We could have also put in the procurement status as in transit, and it would have picked up this one and any other one in transit. But over here we threw in the PO number. I want to look at this one specific. You can see my procurement status has now changed to in transit, and my acknowledgement status is okay, and we're still not invoiced. Okay. My events in the bottom over here, we've received that ASN. We haven't received the goods yet. Okay. So just go through. I don't need to go through the rest, I think, but that's pretty much how it goes. So when you do the receiving of the goods, the invoice receipt, the payment happens, the events just flow down there, changing the status and making it immediately visible to anybody with access to that report. If we match it up against the plan, and we'll go through some of those in a little bit, and it's not right, then we raise an exception. Those exceptions can either be workflows. There's tight integration with workflows, so we can actually kick off another process to go and take corrective action. That's a common use of that. Or the second one is to raise an alert. There's tight integration between EM and the alert framework. And we generate an alert, and that goes into your alert inbox. This is an example of this. This particular scenario that went live into production used this exact scenario. So they had, for example, here's an inbox over here, PO goods receipt with date discrepancy. PO goods receipt with quantity discrepancy. There's a PO acknowledgement delivery date discrepancy. So remember when I said the R1 came in okay, if it comes in and it's matched up against the plan, it's not deemed okay, and we raise an exception, and in this case an alert. This particular client thought that their POs were being executed pretty well by their suppliers, so they went live with this exception functionality into the alert inbox for people getting the email, and they had to turn it down after the first week because of all the spam. Basically, every PO had several issues with it, so either from an acknowledgement perspective, a goods receipt perspective, ASN perspective, invoicing, all came out different. So they were getting spammed by everything. So they actually wrote a report rather to show all the errors, so they could slowly go and address this with the suppliers and say, listen, when we order something like this, it needs to be what we ordered, not what you think we ordered. And potentially also work with forecasting to make sure that they have the right information to be able to supply what it is that we're asking them. Another thing that went wrong at this particular client is a lot of their plans were wrong. So if their master data is wrong in the system, then the plan as to when things should occur comes up incorrectly. Then those events come and go without being received, so they become overdue. Again, they were raising alerts and telling the buyers, oh, this should have happened, but it didn't happen. It was being spammed, so they wrote a report. They said on a daily basis they would send to all the overdue events that were applicable to that buyer, and they would work through it that day. Again, hopefully just correcting the master data so that next time around it doesn't go overdue and the plan is right. Okay, so this is just one of those things. These are all the events with the purchase order number lines and which ones actually didn't occur during the period that it should have occurred. The second one is we did this to introduce an EDI view into the business process. And I'll show you what we're talking about over now. We want to track the purchase orders all the way from PO acknowledgement, goods receipt, invoice receipt to changes. So it's the same scenario that we just went through over here. And we want to react immediately to those changes. We want to also track untimely or non-receipt of those events. And we want to track the supplier EDI success and failure. All right. The last part that we added over here is to understand how the procurement process was performing, and then also in particular to the EDI piece. So the normal business process is the one on the left-hand side, the one that pretty much we followed exactly right now. PO created, PO acknowledged, goods receipt, and PO invoice receipt. No payment, but they stopped at this particular point. But after the PO was created, there was integration between SAP and the EDI translator, which means that when we send an IDOC to that translator was able to send us back a status IDOC that tells us how well it was performing going through the EDI process. So the first thing was that when the PO is transmitted, it's the very first notice from the EDI translator to say, I got your IDOC, thank you. So it would send us back the status. Then the second one would be once it's run through the translation process in EDI, and there's no errors, we would get back it's mapped okay error status message. Then they basically send the communication to the supplier to say, well, here's your 850 message. Once the supplier functionally acknowledges the receipt of that, so it's a technical acknowledgement in the EDI space, we receive that functional acknowledgement, we send it back to SAP. So now SAP has the visibility to the fact that, first of all, it got to the translator, so we're okay with our external communication. It's passed our mapping, so in other words, everything that was needed to be on the PO was on the PO that was required. And the third thing was the supplier has functionally acknowledged receipt of that one. For each one of these statuses, there was the converse error status, except for the first one. So, for example, the first one is, it was literally just that we got this one. So if we didn't get it, and we gave them 50 minutes to get it, then our status in event management would change to overdue, and we would say, hey, there's a potential PO here that hasn't got out to this out to our EDI translator. Let's go check the output. Let's go make sure that it's over there. Right? So that was the purpose of that one. But the mapping, okay, if that came back with an error, then we would get an error. The EDI IDOC would go into an error status, and the workflow would be triggered to the right person to fix that up, as well as in the SAP event management, we'd show that this particular process is in error right now. Likewise, if we send the acknowledgement to our supplier and they come back and they don't, they acknowledge it but with error, then we have an issue with that too. So then we can also take corrective action. Okay. So if we look at the expected events from an overview on the right-hand side, from our PO status piece, we have PO transmitted, we have PO mapped, and then we have PO 850 received at the vendor. Then we have acknowledged, the expected event being 2 days after the PO created. So we gave the, it's based on your supplier agreement, but in this one they had 2 days to respond to that one. And then the goods receipt was based on the PO schedule. Invoice receipt, 7 days after goods receipt date. That was the business process that they put out there. From an unexpected event perspective, we have to configure that in event management, obviously, but we expect a PO delivery date or quantity change. We have an acknowledgement, a goods receipt, an invoice receipt, amount, quantity, or date change. So any one of the business processes or transactions that we can execute, we're expecting the ability to be able to identify and register a quantity, price, or date change. Okay, so if I look at that in more detail, the status values, and these are the status values, for example, you're searching on the web. From a PO perspective, if I look down on the right-hand side, I can have my POs created. That's a good green status. And in our example, we didn't show the earlier one, the icons, but you can have on your list just the icon value, just so that you can visually see which ones are doing well, which ones aren't. If we get a delivery date change or a quantity change, we flag that as an exception. So now this is something that we need to deal with. PO has been sent as late. So in other words, this is that scenario where I've sent it to my translator. They haven't acknowledged it within the amount of time that we gave to them. So now it's late. So now this is something I need to look at. The PO has been sent to our translator. So that's good. That's a green one. And then the PO sent to the translator is late as well. The no PO receipt at the EDI translation, so that's also a notification that things aren't happening on their side. So that's the receipt of from the supplier side hasn't occurred. So that's my 997 functional acknowledgement back from the supplier. We've got PO release. Those are a few different statuses, and PO release is late. PO receipt at vendor location. PO receipt at vendor location is late. No PO receipt at vendor location. So a bunch of different statuses that we can actually register against the PO itself. And each one of those will be triggered either by the receipt of an event or the non-receipt of the event when it should have occurred at that particular time. Okay, so just if we take it on the left-hand side, our stage one, we've got created, we've got PO has changed in any way, so we've changed the delivery or we've changed the quantity. Then we've got PO transmitted to the EDI and the corresponding late one. Then we've got PO sent to the VAN, which is our value-added network, which is the communication between us and our supplier. And we've got PO acknowledged by the vendor, so now they've actually picked it up on their side. And then maybe they were also late on that one, so we can do that. And then the PO has been released. The second stage of our one is now the acknowledgement of this. So now that they've actually got the PO, what statuses can the acknowledgement come in? Well, first of all, we start off with no acknowledgement. Every PO starts off with that. Then the next one can be PO acknowledged, which is my OK status on the previous one, or it's acknowledged with discrepancy, or it was late. Okay, so they acknowledged with the discrepancy, and the only one we tracked here was the date. That's a red status, so that's like an error now. This is, not according to the plan, and we need to adjust accordingly. And if it doesn't happen, it's late. The third stage of the procure-to-pay process is my goods receipt. So I'll start off with no goods receipt. And then as soon as I get the goods receipt, obviously that's a good one. But then if I get a goods receipt with a date change, so we get the goods receipt on a different date than what I planned it, that's a discrepancy. If I get a quantity discrepancy, so I'm expecting to receive 5 and I got 4, that's also a discrepancy. And maybe, I've also got 4, but I also got it on the wrong date. That's another one. And then ultimately, if it comes and goes, the date and time we're expecting to receive this goods, and it's gone, then it becomes late. All right, so same sort of thing on the invoicing side too. We're checking amount and the quantity, so not so much the date, not interested in the date, but more the amount. So the actual invoice amount was at what we had on the PO. And all of these things had some sort of tolerances, so we gave them a little bit of a leeway. But if it's outside of that tolerance, then we'd raise this discrepancy. So with this particular scenario, this is what the web UI at the end of the day looked like, and you can see the icons over there. So if I'm looking at my purchase orders and I just run it wide open over here, I can see I've got several POs down the left-hand side. My PO statuses are, I've got 2 green ones, 4 yellow ones, and the yellow ones are for quantity change and a delivery date change. So I've gone in and changed the PO after the fact, right? Then my acknowledgement status, I've got 4 of the 6 that are good, but 2 of them have been acknowledged with a date discrepancy, and the other one was late. Okay, was received late. Then if I move over to my goods receipt status, you can see that almost all of them, this is good data, but 5 of the 6 had issues. So goods receipt with date discrepancies, well, 5 of them came in at a different date than what the supplier actually said that they would do it, and the other one was perfect. On the invoice receipt side, you can't see the description on, that's on the next screen, but you can see, 3 of the 6 are good. 1 of them was obviously received with the wrong date, or 2 of them were received with the wrong amount, possibly, and the one hasn't. Whatever the yellow one was, whatever yellow status is, we didn't have the yellow one over there. So whatever that status determines, we'd have to actually see what the text is in order to tell us what it is. From a further exception management process, we had two pieces enabled for them over here. We've got the alert framework. We went through that before. So all my list of exceptions, so the little red icons, for example, we're creating an exceptions in the alert monitor for the buyer to go and address it so that they can have a bit more of a proactive way. They don't have to run a report. They get these alerts in the email inbox. The other one was the overdue monitor one, so when those expected events come and go, they would get that notification as well that these things are overdue. So that was implemented over there. From a performance monitoring and a KPI perspective, what monitoring this particular process can give to you, you can see that the process cycle count, so how many POs are going through this particular process, and you can break it down by vendor or product or any parameter that you've stored in the system. We can look at the deviation as a percentage of the total. So in other words, how many PO acknowledgements were received with changes? How many goods receipts were received that didn't match the PO, and how many invoice receipts that didn't match the PO as a percentage for that particular supplier. So you can really get down to a good supplier scorecard, by just using this type of information. Then we can look at cycle duration. So what is my total cycle time? What is the difference between, or the average time between PO create and PO acknowledge for a particular supplier? What is the time between my goods receipt and my invoice receipt for a particular supplier? We can look at, based on specific events, so we can say for goods receipt, what is my percentage on time versus early versus late? Again, a good supplier scorecard type view. The screen at the bottom over here, it's just basically a custom DW screen. We have standard integration between EM and DW, but you need to go develop a report to show you this type of functionality. But it's just to show you what you can do. We have 10 minutes left. I've got a small little scenario over here. For my third scenario, which is supplier prompt payment. And what this is all about is they just wanted the ability to pay the suppliers for capital purchase orders within the period of time. For capital purchase orders for this particular company, they were coming in from overseas, and they would take months to arrive, international shipments. And they would still be net 30 So they cut the PO, the supplier would ship it, and since it took months to get to us, by the time we did a good receipt and released payment for that, the terms were long gone. Right? So they missed out on, it was literally tens of millions of dollars worth of discounts every year. So with this particular scenario, we would like to say, we would like to be able to pay this on terms, but without the risk of paying for something that we potentially not going to receive and we're not really going to pay for. The advantage is obviously is to being able to pay within those terms. We can increase our discount percentage and we can improve our credit rating, because basically they were being knocked because they weren't paying their POs on time and they were getting knocked. The other one was from a transportation perspective. The supplier wanted to be paid on time, so he would fly the product over instead of shipping the product over, because he knew that if he flew it over, it would get you on time and we would pay for the product on time. So one of the advantages that they saw after implementing the solution was the suppliers in fact using a more cost-effective method of getting the product over, because they still got paid on time. So what we did was we paid the logistics invoice based between a match of the invoice needs to match the PO, the ASN ship notice that we received from the supplier. So in other words, that's our 856 inbound telling us that we've shipped the product. And then thirdly, and this is the important one, is the carrier notification of receipt of goods from the supplier, right? So the supplier hands the product off to a carrier, and then that carrier ships it to us. And that carrier can take 2 months to get to us, you know, via an ocean carrier liner, as an example. But from a legality perspective, when the supplier hands the product over to the carrier and they transferred ownership over to the goods, they can then pay, legally invoice us, because we've taken ownership through the carrier. So as long as we get the notification from the carrier, we know that, okay, the products are on its way, they fulfill their part of the agreement, so we can go ahead and release that payment. So how do we do that? Through the enablers. SAP Event Management is the one that is releasing the invoice for the payment based on the events that are received. The supplier, on the supplier side, they need to give us that ASN. Okay, the ASN, or the 856, has the carrier tracking number on it. Then from a carrier side, we need to get then the carrier tracking status notification. So our 214 messages, as an example, that is matched up with the ASN carrier tracking number that the supplier sent us. From a benefits perspective, what this company achieved was over a 50% improvement in prompt payments, and about a 15% of supplier invoices are paid outside of terms, and it was in excess of $20 million a year that they saved once they went live with it. So if we look at the process flow of what we put in to make this happen, from a purchase order perspective, we order the product, we set the terms, and we set the discount. The supplier ships the product, they transfer the goods to the carrier, and then they send us the ASN to tell us they shipped the product. From a carrier perspective, the carrier takes possession of the product and they send us the tracking status. The supplier gives us the invoice. We match that invoice to the PO. We match the ASN with the carrier status for that particular PO. And if it matches, we release the product. We release the invoice for payment. So if I look at this from a business process perspective, diagrammatically, top left, with the customer, we create the purchase order, we send it to the supplier, he creates the sales order. He then ends up shipping that product. At that time of shipping, he sends us the ASN. We put the ASN in event management. From shipping on their side, they can go ahead and they pass that information over to the carrier. The carrier sends me their parcel status information. Okay, so now I've got two parts of the product, or two parts of the equation, and then accounts receivable sends the invoice over to me, to my accounts payable department. So now I have my ASN, which tells me what my tracking number is. I've got my parcel status to say that the carrier has picked it up, so I've acknowledged receipt of the product to my carrier, and I've got my invoice matching my PO. If all three of those match out, I can release that into the system for accounts payable to address and pay. Okay. So let's go through some key points that I want to talk about before we finish up. An exception event is an indication that the supply chain is out of balance, and it's out of balance because either there's a master data issue, we have a behavioral issue, we have a design issue, and there's a system problem. Generally folks jump right into that last part, the system's broken. Okay, no, the system just does what the system's told generally, so that yes, there may be some bugs, but maybe the master data that tells me what my lead time is between, or all the routing information, sending the information, or sending the ASN and the products to me is wrong, so my plan is wrong, so therefore, let's not say that it's overdue when it shouldn't be overdue. Well, fix the master data and it will show the right information. A behavioral issue, like the example that we showed on the supplier side at the movie studio, the suppliers were taking complete advantage of them because they knew their systems weren't able to catch the fact that they were adding products into the boxes, when it came close to the month end and so forth, stuff like that. You need to catch that is, those type of behavioral issues. Event management manages the sequence of expected events or the milestones and highlights the exceptions based on the visibility across the entire process. And that process can be internal or external to your organization. You can receive events from anywhere and capture that if it's relevant to your business process. EM enables the business to leverage that standard functionality, especially in if deviations occur. So using the alert and the workflow framework, we showed how you can integrate when we uncover an exception with the corrective action for that particular issue. Event management also helps to measure the performance of the work product, which is the event, as well as the communication of that fact that it occurred, which is the event message. We didn't cover this too much, but there are those two aspects to it. So when we get an ASN, it tells us that the product shipped at 8 o'clock in the morning, but we could only get the message at, maybe got the message at 2 p.m., right? That may be too late for us. So again, we can measure the compliance. Maybe we have an agreement with our supplier to say, you need to tell me all the communication that's happening, 2 minutes or 2 hours after it actually occurred. If they send me the message 4 hours, it's also out of compliance. Real-time notification of exceptions enhances the visibility and mitigates the business risks. Customers can access the information over the web interface of the event management, which is a pretty cool feature. And then we didn't cover this too, but just to show there is a comprehensive authorization and filter concept that just allows the right people to view the information in event management. So you don't want one supplier to view someone else's other suppliers' POs, as an example. We're running out of time. This is a quick slide just to show some of the use cases. Order to cash scenarios, production order scenario, transportation management of production orders, all common uses out there. If you need more information, please go to our website, Q Data USA, or the WordPress blog. We've got some good information on here. Facebook's got all the latest updates to what we're seeing in the organization too. But if you just need more information on EM, then the two websites are good to go. Or we also have a book out on event management, which you can get out at Amazon if you so wish. Our supply chain extended solutions practice, we follow this sort of methodology to, if you need more information, and just to get an idea as to whether event management's right for you and your organization, we go through a 3-step phase. There's a self-assessment on the website. Go down, take that at your own time. It basically says whether you're ready or not for event management. The second one, if you feel that you passed that particular one, we'll do a one-day readiness assessment, or even sometimes it's an hour-long discussion with you guys. You tell us what's going on, and we'll say whether there's a fit, and maybe we take it a little bit further. When we take that further, we can do a 5 to 10 day assessment on your site. So we look at your data, we look at your business processes. If you have some of the EM capability already, we'll do some training, we'll educate you, we'll actually implement a scenario like the procurement process just so you can have a demo so that you can show the business, do basically a proof of concept. That's possible. But the main purpose of that is to understand your business process, your pain points, and actually put together a roadmap and a budget guideline so that if it meets your needs, we're going to tell you exactly what it'll take to put it in so that you can then basically go get the money to do it, to do the project. So we're just about out of time. We'll have a quick look to see if there's any questions. If there's no questions, we will wrap it up. And as I mentioned, this will be up on YouTube and on our website probably before the end of the day, but definitely by tomorrow. All right, I want to thank you for your time. We'll see you next week when we go through the order to cash scenario.